Well, the government is busy amending the law regulating retirement savings to help people who are heavily indebted. We've spoken about this before on the show. Now, under this new regulation, which is expected to come in next year, workers will be able to draw some of their retirement savings. But Trade Union Federation Cosatu is warning that this is not enough. Let's hear from Cosatu's Deputy Parliamentary Coordinator, Matthew Parks. Matthew, good to have you back on eNCA. And this argument that this might not be a good idea, it's not just Cosatu that feels that. But tell me, first of all, before we unpack it, why is it a concern for Cosatu? Good morning.
Well, actually, good morning. Actually, no, we do welcome it. We've had engagement with Treasury about this for the past 2.5 years. We had first asked in May 2020, when we were under the height of the economic lockdown from COVID-19, to allow workers who are being sent home with no salaries, unable to pay for their families, unable even to pay for the home loans, the debt, the credit cards, the car loans, etc., some limited access to the pension fund. So this is really in response to that call. So we welcome it at an overall level. We think it actually might help many workers who are experiencing financial distress, who are highly indebted, are supporting relatives who have lost jobs, etc. Might help them actually going forward, because in essence it provides for one part for savings, which workers can access once a year as the need arises financially. 2/3 would be for your preservation. We think that might actually help workers to be incentivized to save more for their retirement, knowing that they can access a third in the case of emergency. Our concerns, and we're meeting with Treasury soon, is that to ensure that it does include public and private sector workers, because all workers are bleeding, to make sure that workers can still access their full pension funds when they lose their job or when they're forced to resign. Because when workers lose their jobs, they have no income left. They'll take about 2 years at least to find a job. And you have an economy with an unemployment rate of 45%. We also want to make sure that pension fund board trustees are compelled to give workers some access. We know not the full amount, but some access to the pension funds, and shouldn't be able to simply say no. So there's some technical details we need to sort out first to make sure it actually achieves its objectives. But I think lastly, the thing is that workers are bleeding now. This bill says it's going forward from March next year when it would come into effect. But workers do need some sort of relief immediately when the bill comes into effect. They've been struggling, they've been hanging on. And if you don't provide workers some sort of relief, we fear that what you will have is that some workers will just simply choose to resign.
I suppose the argument, Matthew, is that this is really just a plaster over a much bigger problem. What workers actually need is better working wages so that they don't feel they need to dig into a retirement, even though, as you quite rightly say, Matthew, it's 1/3 of their retirement package. The concern from some economists we've spoken to is that this could end up creating a situation where there's a resignation rush, where workers could feel, let me rather resign, let me rather retire, let me rather get myself retrenched so I can access this money. The problem with that, of course, is the more people that do that, the less money there is in the fund to actually fund those that are still working. This isn't really the solution you want. It's a plaster, isn't it?
Yeah, look, we're fighting many fires at once in South Africa. The real solution is to create jobs. So everybody has a job, so people can take care of themselves. So the workers don't have to support as many unemployed relatives, and obviously that diminishes their salaries and their ability to take care of themselves. And you're right, Gareth, it's about making sure workers are paid a decent wage, a living wage, and about looking at measures to try to reduce the amount of debt levels we have in the country. But be that as may, we need to give some workers some relief now. And the reality is that under the law currently, workers can access the full pension fund if they lose their job or if they resign. So we're trying to avoid those worst case scenarios where workers deplete the pension fund, leave their job and so forth, to give some limited access. But yeah, you're right. The fundamental issue is about making sure workers are paid a living wage, growing the economy, reducing unemployment and so forth. But in the meantime, we have to do something. And the reality is if we don't do something, then workers will simply choose to resign, as they have often done before when there have been changes to the pension laws. So we are hopeful we can manage it. We have to manage it quite sensitively to avoid creating unintended consequences, which will hurt everybody.
Speak to me about those unintended consequences. Perhaps we can unpack a little bit where we talk about those who might then try to have their jobs taken away from them, a non-performance. They might get retrenched as a result and try and live off this 1/3 of this pension fund. Are you not worried that we could end up in a situation where money is being used by those who just don't want to work? They see this as a free ride. I mean, we're South Africans, let's be honest, Matthew, we're not very good at managing our money, that's clear. And we seem to be allergic to saving for our retirement.
Well, look, at the end of the day, we all have to be adults, and we would have confidence in workers to do the right thing. Sure. So if an individual chooses to go on holiday to Mauritius, well, good luck to them, but there would be a consequence to them down the road because they wouldn't have a pension fund in a short space of time. And of course, they would have lost their job. We think most workers would take the mature and pragmatic approach, the responsible approach of using whatever money they can get to pay off debt. But we don't want any worker to leave their job. In an economy of an unemployment rate of 45%, a huge crisis of poverty and inequality. That's why we're saying let's find a middle road, which we think, in essence, the bill provides going forward with some issues to be resolved, where we allow workers who are experiencing financial debt once a year that access to the 1/3 savings pot, so not the full amount, during the normal course of things. We think that might actually help to really incentivize workers to actually save more, which will benefit them because they have a greater savings pool to access when they're in a moment of need. It can help to boost the savings industry and channel investment in the economy, and also help to make sure workers have sufficient funds when they retire, because it is quite scary that only about 6% of workers can afford to retire. So with that, it means that essentially only the rich and a small part of the middle class can afford to retire. But we have to handle it sensitively and to kind of address the areas of concern, because we have seen previously many workers, public servants, teachers, and so forth, when they saw changes to the law and they fear they wouldn't be able to access their funds down the road, and they did opt to resign. And that really creates the worst, because that worker has no job, the pension will be depleted quite soon. And even the company will suffer because they've invested a significant amount of worker training into that worker. That worker is a skilled part of the company, helps to boost the company, etc., or the workplace. So it is about for us kind of addressing very sensitive issues and to make sure we plug all the holes, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of holes to plug on this, Matthew, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot more to say about this when it comes closer and closer for this to come into law effectively as well. I think there's a big difference between using your retirement to pay off debt and using your retirement as a credit card spending account. It seems to be a big problem for us here in South Africa.